One of my favorite stories is Michael Rubin. Michael Rubin was making millions of dollars as a teenager. He actually bought himself a Porsche, but he wasn't old enough yet to have a driver's license. Reselling stuff on eBay or whatever, got enough money, bought a Porsche, showed up in the driveway, and his parents were like, what is that from?
Which is crazy. Wow.
Anthony Pompliano.
Founder and CEO of Professional Capital Management.
And host of the Pomp podcast.
The author of the book,
How to Live an Extraordinary Life.
That is motherfucking exceptional.
People are like, oh, Warren Buffett, he's so smart, he's all this stuff. Warren Buffett has trained for 6 decades, 7 decades? Jeff Bezos is rich because he figured out, how can I let somebody press a button on their phone and get something delivered to them in under 24 hours? Tiger Woods, the stories are legendary of his dad. His dad told him, I'm gonna make you the best in the world. But if you ever want me to stop, you only have to say one word, enough. And Tiger never said it. And so you look at that and you say, like, here's a demanding father, like all this stuff. That created a really extreme outcome in that specific sport. It is this weird thing. If you want the best for your kid, you actually got to give them a lot of opportunity to fail. If your kid never struggles, if your kid never gets exposed to difficult things, how are they going to be able to deal with that on their own?
It's a good conversation.
Right? If you're just going to do like chit chat, I'm not interested.
I actually am blown away. He's right here in the suit. He's wearing a nicer outfit. Well, hey, Pomp, what's up?
What's going on?
Welcome to another episode of High Alchemy. A very, very special guest today, Anthony Pompliano. I think he's most known for being a Nucleus investor. Is that correct?
Exactly.
Right. That's it.
It's probably my best decision ever.
It will be. That's for sure. We were just talking about this off camera. I think let's just jump right in. How did we meet? Tell me the story. Tell me the story. Actually, going back to you and Delhi, before you and I even met. What's the context here?
I like to either host dinners or go to dinners where there's, a group
Yeah, you
of
host
people.
nice dinners. We've been to some before in your apartment.
There's a person who people would know in the tech industry that was hosting a dinner at their home in South Florida. Myself, Delian, a couple other friends were all there. And I don't really like going to these dinners if it's just kind of like nonsense talk, right? If you're just going to do like chit chat, I'm not interested. And so I have a couple of questions that I like to pose to the group and usually can very quickly get to some valuable conversation. And one of the questions I like to ask is, what is the one thing that you believe that if you said out loud, you think you'd be canceled for it?
Classic question.
And so on one hand, there's a play on like, what do you believe that other people disagree with you on? Mm-hmm. But also that you think you'll be canceled for says a lot about what you think the position in society is. So sometimes people will say something and you're like, everyone agrees with you. Like, that's not a cancelable thing. Like, actually, that's the consensus view. And then other times people will say something and you're like, you definitely should not repeat that out loud, right? Like, that is, okay. And so in this conversation, I think it started with somebody said, I think that Elon Musk has a moral responsibility to procreate.
Oh, he's taking that to heart.
Because he is so intelligent and resourceful, blah, blah, whatever. It started to morph, and this is where it gets fun. And at some point, somebody said something about, could you actually do it based on intelligence? And of course, that kicked off a whole thing. And there's tons of like periods in time in history where you're like, hey, that didn't go so well. Then there's like the promise of new technology. And you have this like very kind of interesting conversation. And the nice thing about this table in particular is there's people from all walks of life there. So you have some people who know more about regulation. You have more people who know about technology. You have some people who think about, kind of psychology or society or whatever. Like it's a really kind of well-rounded conversation. And so Delian and I were like, this is awesome. Like, right. Like this is exactly what we like to talk about. And then I don't think he had met you yet.
No.
But I think he called me like a week later or texted me or whatever. And he was like, I found it. And I was like, what? He's like, remember what we were talking about? Like, I found someone doing it. And I was like, no, you didn't. like, ha, 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 right? And he's like, no, seriously. And he sent me the information. And I was like, done. Like, I'm in. Like, introduce me to this guy. And I think at the time, I don't know if you guys publicly talk about this stuff anymore or not supposed to talk about it, whatever. But there were some specific genes that you all thought were likely able to identify. And if you could identify those, that would drastically change the way that people looked at genetics, the way that they used genetics in everyday decision making. And so it really just boiled down to this idea of like, why are we operating with a lack of information? If we can get information, then how people choose to use that information, you can debate later on. But the fact that there's information that we know exists, but nobody's going and getting it, that feels like that's an easy, kind of bridge to create a solution. And I think that's what you guys are doing. And so if I don't ask that question at that dinner, and person who will go unnamed doesn't say, I think Elon should be procreating everywhere, you and I probably never meet.
Which is crazy. Wow.
I mean, a good version of it is, should he, I think the conclusion was he should procreate, but also if you go around, you have a bunch of babies and they know that they're Elon's kid, but he's not involved, that actually may be detrimental. And so instead, he should just like donate sperm to sperm banks all over the country, not tell anyone.
No psychological harm basically to the child, you're saying?
Correct.
So they get the genes, but no psychological harm. So
that was like not everyone agreed, but like I think that was like the general consensus of like an interesting idea.
So what's your take on it now though? Because Elon seems to be, having a lot of different kids and maybe some psychological harm. Are you pro, against? What do you think?
I am a very big believer that the family unit is very important. It has been very effective at local governance for a long time, for literally centuries. I think that there is many different developmental things that happen with children by having access to their parents, to having discipline, to having role models, all that kind of stuff. I understand that that's not everyone's experience. I understand that's not everyone's, kind of desire. But from my perspective, we need more of that in society rather than less. And so there is probably some balance between we need procreation and we need the birth rate to go up and that, but also there's trade-offs. And so what are you optimizing for? Right? It's kind of like, are you optimizing for aggregate population number, or are you optimizing for like quality of, upbringing environment? Different people optimize for different things. And there's 8+ billion people in the world. Not everyone's going to agree. Yeah,
no, absolutely. And ultimately it comes down to the liberty. I mean, he has the right to do that if he wants to do that,
Of course.
So you and I meet, this is like 2021? Probably late 2021, right? And I remember actually we, right after Founders Fund led the seed round, there was a lunch in Miami. It was me, you, Deli, and Keith. You want to tell the story briefly? It was in Miami.
And there's just like 4 Ferraris flying down the highway. Just everyone talking as fast as possible.
4.
And, at times you're like, I'm in the lead, and then somebody else, like Deli, opens his mouth. You're going 90. You're like, I'm flying. And you're like, wow, I just went 150 down the highway. Like you ever go down fast down the highway and somebody passes you and you're like, well, they got to be going at least 20 to 30 miles faster than me to pass me at that speed. Like that was the whole conversation. So we had 17 hours of conversation in 30 minutes.
I'll never forget something. It was really funny. So I'm like yapping about something. Like I'm on one of my like genetic rants. Like I'm telling Keith something, and then I remember Keith just pauses. He turns to you. He's like, "Are you you're gonna come in this?" And you're like, "I'm already in." You're like, "I'm already in."
Like Keith, I wouldn't be sitting here if I wasn't already an investor.
Yeah, exactly. And that was a time because wait, were you in Miami at that time, or you in Miami? How long were you in Miami for?
2 years.
2 years, and then you moved back to New York, right?
Correct.
And so you moved to New York in 2023.
Yeah. 2023. Yeah.
And when did you have your baby girl? You had a baby girl, right? Baby girl.
I did.
Yeah. Like how's that? I mean, how's that been going?
2022.
22. So then, wait, was she born in Miami or?
She was.
She was born in Miami. Oh,
Yeah,
cool.
Yeah.
And then basically a year later, you're like, let's go to New York.
Yeah.
What was the impetus there? Why'd you move back to New York?
Happy wife, happy. No, I'm joking. No, I think there was a couple things. One, Plana definitely. I think she liked Miami. She loves New York, and so either one. I could be happy in either place. But I do think that there's more stuff probably for children in New York than there is in Miami. Just you have density, right? So there's just stuff all the time and things that come through New York, et cetera. 2, there's definitely more density from a business perspective in terms of the people you can meet. A lot of the media stuff that we do, it's all based in New York. And so it was the situation where like, if you could be happy in either one, but one area is definitely better for business than the other, given your type of business, then, it makes it a pretty easy decision. But I think ideally there's a lot of people, frankly, who are like, hey, I'd like to do both. Money, right, is a limiting factor for a majority of the country. On top of that, also, if you have kids, they got to be in school. There's like logistics issues, whatever. But of course, if you go and you ask any person in the country, for the most part, you're like, hey, during the really bad winter, would you like to go somewhere warm? Like, yeah. Right. And then like when it's really hot in an area, would you like to go back to an area that's not as hot? Like, yeah. And so this isn't like rocket science. And I joke all the time that why do young people all want to like recreate everything? It's just like, hey, people have been doing this for a really, really long time. Because we've got young kids, we can't do that. So we live in New York full time and don't really go anywhere. But I think that's kind of like the goal of a lot of people is they want to be able to, have some mobility to it. But you got to have the right, kind of life situation, obviously money situation. And that's what people are trying to figure out.
And so, okay, so you moved back to New York. You've been here for a couple of years. And then I'm curious what's it like to be a father. Like what how you talked about family is the greatest wealth, right? That's ultimately, the kind of family unit is ultimately the greatest sort of form of regulation. What have you learned? What's maybe surprised you the most? Are you sleeping? Give me some more details here.
I think that there are maybe three big buckets. One is there's a lot of things that you were told throughout your life, whether it's by your parents, people that cared about you, mentors, teachers, coaches, whatever, that you don't actually internalize until you've got to turn around and tell it to somebody else. So in a weird way, you don't really understand the information until you could teach it to somebody else.
Yeah.
Same thing here. So I think that's been like a pretty interesting trend or kind of phenomenon. The second is you think that you like love things until you actually are like playing with a kid and you're just like, I literally will risk my life to make sure you're okay. And as somebody who literally was willing to do that for other people before, it's different, man. It's just like, you're just like, whatever.
Actually, I think one time we were at dinner and you said some story about how you saved someone's life. Isn't this? I remember this.
In New York City?
Yeah. Do you remember this?
I remember it.
Of course you remember
vividly.
that. You did it. Wait, can you please tell this story? Is this, can you go public with this? This is an amazing story.
So you're going to get uninvited from dinner.
This is an amazing story.
I was with Paulina. We were walking down 3rd Avenue, and I think it's 67th and 3rd. We walked up, and there was like a half circle of people standing kind of on the corner of the sidewalk, and they were all looking at the ground. And so in New York, like people can be doing all kinds of crazy. You just walk around and whatever. You don't even like care what they're looking at. But for whatever reason, like you walk around and you see a guy, and he's just laying in the street, and he's dead, just like not moving, limp, just like he looks dead. And the reason why it caught my attention was, one, he was laying in the street, but also two, was he had on an Amazon delivery vest. And so I was like, what is an Amazon delivery driver or like a delivery person laying in the middle of the street dead? Like, did he get hit by a car? Did it? Like, like who knows what happened? And so I asked somebody, I say, hey, what happened to the guy? And she goes, I don't know. And so I said, what happened? I don't know. Like, did anyone check on him? And they're like, no. So you just have like probably like 8 or 9 people all just staring at this guy.
Classic.
And he's laying there and he's like completely lifeless. So I go around him, I get down on the ground, and he's laying in a way where like his face is on the pavement. Not even like, hey, I like fell and like I'm like recovered. Like he's like out. And so I start talking to him and I'm like, hey man, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Whatever. And I realized that he is breathing, but he's not responding. And he's breathing very shallow. And so I take my fist and I kind of put it on his back and I just like move it like almost like along his spine to see if there's any like movement in him. And not really. So I'm like, all right, this guy is not in good shape right now. And so I look up. Now I'm like kind of like on my knee and I look up. Now there's like 15 people sitting there, standing there just looking at me. And I look at a woman and I say, call the police. She goes, oh, okay. And so she starts to call the police. And I look at another woman and I say, get me some water. And she digs into like these big ass bags that like women carry around sometimes in New York. I don't know if you've ever seen these things. Just like, there's like everything in it, right? She just digs in there and she comes back 30 seconds later with like a half drinking Dasani water bottle. I'm like, just give me that, right? And so I can hear the woman on the phone with the police and I'm trying to give this guy water. But he like, I don't want to like move him. Right, because you don't know, like maybe he's like seriously injured, and so I'm like trying to like get like the water like won't get to his mouth the way he's laying, and so I'm like, all right, this is not good. And you could tell from his breath like he needs help, and so I hear the woman on the phone being like, so I was walking down the sidewalk, like, dude, lady, we don't have time for a novel, like just tell them 67th and 3rd, like get the police here immediately. And so I'm like, all right, this is not going well. I am depending on people who are not dependable. We're in New York City. I'm 3rd Avenue. Like there's cops everywhere. So I just stand up and I look down east on 62nd or 67th. Don't see anybody. I look south on 3rd Avenue. See no police. Look north on 3rd Avenue. See no police. I'm like, of course, the one time you need the police, they're not there. So then I look west on 67th and I see about halfway down the avenue, pulled over to the right side of the road, there's a police car and the sirens are on, like the lights are on. Perfect. I don't say a word to anybody else. I don't even look at traffic. I just start running. So I cross the intersection and I'm running in the street. Now, a key part of this story is that I have on sweatpants and like a hoodie zip up sweatshirt because I'd been working out and we went for a walk. And so as I'm running, it's not that far, but as I'm running, I see on the right side out of the corner of my eye that there's a bunch of people gathered on the sidewalk, but I don't think anything of it. And so I run down to the police vehicle and I see 2 cops standing on the stoop. Later, I find out it's a police station, but I didn't know that. So I get there and I'm like, whew, that's a lot faster than I've ran in a long time. But I'm like, hey, there's a guy. He's laying in the street. He's, I think, conscious. He's barely breathing. I don't know how long I can keep him like this. I need help. 2 cops, male and a female. Male cop goes, what? I'm like, you're not helpful. Female cop says, where? I'm like, on the corner. She just says to me the magic word. She goes, let's go. I'm like, let's go. So I turn and I see that they're coming down off the stairs. They're going to like go with me, but they're like moving. So I'm like, all right, cool. I'm going to run. They're going to run. So I start running on the sidewalk. And as I'm now running back, I understand what is in front of me, which is there is a synagogue. This is like 3:30, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Like kids are getting out of school, right? Or coming out of the synagogue. There's parents. So that's why there was that big gaggle. This was, I think, in like late October or November. So all of the October 7th stuff had just happened. There's a lot of security everywhere. Like, rightfully so that all this is going on. And as I'm running, it clicks in my head that a man in a hoodie and sweatpants is running down the sidewalk and there's 2 cops chasing him. And so I have a choice. I can stop and make sure that everyone knows I'm not a criminal, or I can actually help this guy. And so I just start yelling at the top of my lungs as I'm running down the sidewalk, get out of the way, get out of the way. And so parents are like turning, seeing me coming, and they start pulling their kids off the sidewalk like to get out of the way. And so I go flying by and then like 2 cops is like, and so we're running up to 3rd Avenue and you know how you like sometimes walk up, you're like, I hope that it changes. I hope it changes. I hope it changes to walk, right? Well, if you're running, you're like, I really hope it changes to walk. It doesn't change. So I just run out in the middle of the street in 3rd Avenue and I just put my hands up like I'm like a traffic cop and I just stop traffic on 3rd Avenue. Way easier than I ever thought that would be. And the 2 cops run behind me because they now see the guy laying, on the other side of the intersection. And they run up to him. And then like once they run by, it's kind of like anticlimactic. You're like, okay, but you guys can just like drive now. Like, like just go ahead. So I walk over to the cop and I say to him, I'm like, hey man, do you need me? Like I'm good. I don't want to be involved in this. Like I just got him help. I'm going to leave. And so while I'm doing that, there's a yellow school bus who is blocked because this guy's laying in the road. And this dude is just laying on the horn, the driver. And he pokes it, he like opens the window and he starts yelling at the cop. He's like, will you just move him onto the sidewalk? Get out of my way. Like most New York shit ever, right? And the cop literally turns to him and just tells him to fuck off. And he's like, go around. And I'm like, I definitely need to get out of this situation. So we leave and Polina's like, where'd you go? Like, all said whatever. So like, I'm like, all right, I did my good deed for the day. I don't need to be chased by cops anymore today. Like, let's just go home. We get 1 block down the street and I see another Amazon delivery guy and I can't help myself. So I go, yo man, I don't know how this works. If you guys got like teams or bosses or what, but like one of your boys is unconscious like a block away with the vest on. Like maybe you want to radio it in. And this dude literally goes, takes his headphones out and he goes, nah, and just keeps delivering packages. And so I jokingly always say, be careful. If you see him on the Upper East Side, I may save someone's life. Because it's crazy that we live in a society where, why are those people not helping them? It's because they're scared. Like they don't want to get in trouble. They feel like if, they say something or do something or touch them or whatever, like they could be sued or, something could happen or whatever. And so we just turned into this society where people are very afraid of like actually acting. But at some point you're like, hey, are you just going to like watch this dude lay here, barely breathing? Or are you going to help him? And if there's consequences, so be it, right? But like you did the right thing. Like, you can go home and you can go to sleep at night.
Yeah.
And so people who know that story like to give me a hard time about it because they're like, you didn't really save his life. I'm like, well, I don't know. Like, you don't know. You can't run the other experiment, right? Like, you don't know what happens if you're not
Well,
doing
what happened to him? Do you know?
Later, somebody that we knew was walking up the block, and I had seen them, so I just told them the story, and they saw them getting put into an ambulance, but that's the end. So if there's an Amazon delivery guy out there, and you're wondering who's the dude in the sweatshirt who saved your life,
he's right here in the suit. He's always wearing a nicer outfit. Wow. So and let's go all the way back, because you were saying for your daughter you would save her life, and then you said that's something you really did. And there you go. I want people to know that's something you really did.
It's I think when it comes to kids, like there's an element of you want to be protective of them, but also I think that what people struggle with, and I talk to a lot of parents about it, is how you want your kids to live a better life than you live, but you also understand that some of the ingredients of what you went through create the foundation to be able to live that life. So for example, if your kid never struggles, if your kid never gets exposed to difficult things, how are they going to be able to deal with that on their own? So you actually need your kid to, like suffer in some way, but losing a baseball game is not real suffering compared to what some people go through. So, it's kind of like it's all relative, but you need your kid to lose sometimes. You need your kid to, have difficult things. You can't constantly solve the problem for them. You can't tell them the answers. Like you really need to create an environment where you're trying to teach your kid how to actually be successful in any environment. And when we had the first kid, Plin and I talked about, what's the one thing we want to teach our kid? If we only could teach them one thing, what's that thing? And what we ultimately came down to was we want to teach them good decision making. And the reason why good decision making was so important is because it's the most applicable skill you could teach someone that will help them throughout their life, regardless of age. Any situation they're in, regardless of the context, if they're a good decision maker, they've got higher odds of succeeding in it than anything else. And so how do you teach good decision making? A lot of it, frankly, is just reps. And so if you're constantly solving the problem, giving the answer, whatever for your kid, and you're kind of like this paternalistic kind of helicopter parent, they're not actually getting the experience of decision making. And so it is this weird thing. If you want the best for your kid, you actually got to give them a lot of opportunity to fail. And that is hard, I think, for parents because you want your kid to be successful.
Yeah, this is really interesting because, people constantly observe in kind of Silicon Valley that you see immigrants, first generation founders, they tend to have some, Delian's old thing, which is, chips on shoulder, chips in pocket kind of idea, right? And maybe someone has endured some sort of extreme psychological event, some sort of difficult, parental, immigrant, whatever, war even like situation that enabled and drives them forward, right? And so it's almost like this thing where you see some of the people, not everyone, but a lot of the people who are some of the most ambitious people on the planet, right? Elon Musk comes to mind, for example, seem to have some sort of psychologically difficult childhood. And I think it can go either two ways, right? It can either kind of ruin you as a person or it can maybe make you into such an extremely high performer. You see that with athletes, et cetera, as well.
Extreme situations create extreme outcomes. Extreme outcomes can be positive or negative.
Yeah. And so then on that, like, how do you think about that? Like, are you ever like, okay, like, do you want your daughter to be exceptionally high performing in a specific, vertical? And then given that, do you ever think to yourself, and this might be a little bit crazy to say, but, for the purposes of argument, why not? Hey, I have to make sure, like, to your point, like a baseball game, that's not, sure, maybe build some character, but come on, a baseball game, right? Like, do you have to endure some sort of more psychologically difficult thing for your child so they can have that kind of thick skin that's needed to be extremely successful in, sports, business, etc.? How do you think about solving that problem?
Well, think about sports as maybe the clearest example. So Tiger Woods, the stories are legendary of his dad. Literally, my understanding is that they had a safe word. And his dad told him, I'm going to be really hard on you. I'm going to make you the best in the world. But if you ever want me to stop, you only have to say one word. Enough. You say that word and I'll stop. And Tiger never said it. And so you look at that and you say, like, here's a demanding father, like, all this stuff. Like, that created a really extreme outcome in that specific sport. If you watch the movie King Richard, which is Venus and Serena Williams and their father, right? Incredibly demanding father, incredibly driven, right? All this kind of stuff, extreme outcome. And so I say that because as far as I understand, those environments were actually, from a structural standpoint, both the mother and the father were in the picture of the child, right? And the parents really cared about the kid, but it was the demanding aspect is what that extreme, kind of experience was. And so it can be, you come from a broken home, you can come from poverty, you can come through some...
Or you're saying it can be controlled and calculated. Right.
That's another extreme, right? It also could be that you're living in your house and all of a sudden it catches on fire, right? And so it's a one-time extreme event, and there's a brush with death or something, right? Like there's all these different things, and so I don't think so much of it as like there's a playbook that you can replicate. What I do think is true is in most people who end up being successful, you actually can draw a line through practice, and so there can be extremism of practice. And so if you look at like one of my favorite stories is Michael Rubin. Michael Rubin was making millions of dollars as a teenager. I think the story goes that he actually bought himself a Porsche, but he wasn't old enough yet to have a driver's license. And so he was like, reselling stuff on eBay or whatever, got enough money, bought a Porsche, it showed up in the driveway, and his parents were like, what is that from? And he was like, oh, sorry, I bought that. I just wanted it. Right. So you're like, okay, well, no wonder Michael Rubin's built a tens of billions of dollar company. It's because he's been practicing for 30, 40, 50 years. And so if you go and you look, Michael Jordan, there's a video that recently came out and they talk about Michael Jordan. Actually, everyone knew he was going to be good in high school when he was a senior. And then people would see him by the time he was towards the end of his college career. And they're like, oh my God, that dude's way better now. And they're like, obviously he's going to be good in the NBA. And then they would see him 5 or 10 years later and they'd be like, dude, that guy got even better. Like he just constantly kept improving. And so how do you push your kid to do that? I tend to think some of it is innate, and then some of it is, you want them just to be excellent at whatever they do. Give them the choice of what they want to do, but then encourage excellence in whatever their pursuit is. And that's where you can kind of match the, enthusiasm or excitement for what they're passionate about, but then also, have this standard of excellence.
Yeah. And I think to your point too, it's almost like, okay, you have this, like in the King Richard's case, for example, or in the Tiger Woods case, you have a rare moment where the parent literally, the moment their, son, daughter is born to this world, their entire modus operandi, their entire being is, you're going to be the best in the world at this. Everything they do, everything they think, everything they teach, the entire way, the entire psychology, all the training, all the practice, right, is kind of put into that mission. And then it's up to the kid to kind of match that, because sometimes it crushes kids. Like I've seen many, many examples, whether it's in academia or whether it's in sports, of parents who have kind of degree of obsession with a specific craft, but they just can't get their kid to do it. So there almost has to be that magic where the parent, they almost are having a kid with a very specific goal of, you're going to be the best in the world at this sport. And then the kid can endure the, psychological and also physical and also just love of the sport. And then those things come together, right? It's almost like when a founder, an exceptional founder meets an exceptional market, right? It's like these two things just like kind of exponentiate together. And to your point too, and I realize this a lot in entrepreneurship too, I see this a lot with Hybrid Nucleus, which is like growth isn't linear. It's actually compounds. It's exponential, right? We always appreciate kind of exponentials in the context of investing, but I think we often miss it for experience, that if you do something long enough, what happens is the network, the knowledge, the technical chops, the operational chops, the regulations, just even your taste for the problem, it all starts compounding such that, with each marginal year, you're not a year ahead, you're actually 10 years ahead, right? And I think then in the context of like, Michael Jordan, at some point when Michael Jordan, goes from college, to the NBA, that, 2-3 years, he becomes so dramatically better. That's why you see actually a power law, in athletes, because you have to wonder, a lot of these athletes, presumably they all put in extraordinary amounts of hours. But I think what happens maybe is at some point the intensity breaks, right? When the intensity breaks, you don't just lose a little. You lose a dramatic amount. You lose an super linear amount, right? Do you think that's correct? Do you think that's true?
Well, I think that there are intense people and they're going to be intense in whatever they do. Same way that there's going to be focused people or obsessed people. The one aspect that I think people probably over-rotate on is kind of this, again, you see it in sports. Sports kind of magnifies all of this. I know some friends who are like, I want my kid to be the number one basketball player in the world.
Do you have any goal like that for your daughter, by the way?
Zero.
No.
None.
So you expect your daughter to come to you and say, I have this bliss, I have this craft, and then you're going to say, okay, I'm going to support that?
Yeah, I mean, both my daughter and my son, we look at it and we say, we want them to experience as much, kind of differentiation as possible, see what they want to do. Like, it's their life. It's not my life, right? But the one thing that I do want to instill in them is a pursuit of excellence or a bar of excellence. And so if you come to me and you say you want to be a singer, I want you to be an excellent singer. If you come to me and you say you want to be a basketball player.
Have they said anything like this too? I'm curious.
No, they're young. They're too young, right? I mean, every day, my daughter tells me she wants to be a unicorn. So let's go be an excellent unicorn. 100%. Right? Like, today we're going to be an excellent unicorn. But so when you think about this, it's just like the thing I'm obsessed with is the excellence of whatever you want to do. And I think that, look, my parents were the same way. Now, when I would go to school, my dad would always get mad at me because I'd come home and, in high school, I wasn't getting D's and F's. I wasn't really trying, right? I was smart enough to basically get by, and I probably spent more time trying to figure out how not to do the work than if I just did the work, right? But I just didn't care. I was just like, I don't care about this thing. I'm never going to use this thing. I'm not interested in it. You're making me do it, whatever. And so I always made sure that I wasn't the worst in the class. And so maybe I was like middle of the pack. And he'd be so frustrated. He's like, I know that you can be the best in the class. You just aren't trying. You're not caring, whatever. I'm like, yeah, but look at all, my 5 idiot friends or my 5 friends who aren't trying or whatever. I'm better than they are. And he used to get mad because he's like, stop comparing yourself to the bottom of the bucket. Compare yourself to the best person in the class. And it wasn't until I found things that I was really interested in that then became very obvious, like that's the way to think about it. And so same thing here is if you're going to do something, try to be the best at it. And maybe a kid tries a sport and they don't like it. That's fine, right? But if they're trying to be the best at it, they then can take that idea of trying to be the best and apply it to the next thing. Maybe it's a musical instrument. Maybe it's some sort of academic discipline or whatever. But I think that excellence, you can really see it in people who end up being highly successful. You can kind of plot through their life. There was always these hints of excellence. It may have been things that they did. It may have been, businesses or projects they worked on. It may have been in the way that they treated people. It may have been sports-wise. It may have been in their obsession with learning or meeting people or whatever. And so you look at this throughout time and you're like, oh, this person was constantly pursuing excellence. It just so happens that it started in this one direction and it morphed and it evolved and they matured and they got different interests, whatever, and it ended up over here. And so it's obvious why this is excellent. And one of my favorite examples of this is Travis Kalanick from Uber. Everyone now knows that while he was running Uber, he was the number 1 or number 2 Wii player in the world for Wii tennis.
Yeah.
Like that's crazy.
That is crazy.
Right? Elon is supposedly one of the top like video game or computer game players at whatever game he's playing, right? And sure, there's people say, oh, it's not real. Trust me, these people want to be excellent at everything they do. And so you can tie that back to just throughout their life, they continued to try to establish what is that bar. And, Keith's got this great kind of advice to young people where he says, rather than go try to start your company right out of the gate, some people or many people should actually go work at a company where they can see excellence so they know what it looks like. They know what it feels like. They know what it smells like, right? Like that's what excellence is. And then go start your company after 2 or 3 years and you can take what you learned and what you saw and then apply it to your thing. I think life's very similar, right? Like how many kids in high school know what excellence is? No, they just know what's around them, what they've been exposed to. And so it takes a parent, it takes a mentor, it takes a teacher, a coach, somebody to say, hey, this is the bar of excellence. I'm going to hold you to this bar. And if you can do that, it's a gift to a kid, regardless of how they want to apply it.
Do you apply this framework when evaluating founders to invest or not? Do you look for a consistent track record of excellence, of high agency, and then does that help you basically ultimately make the decision? Right? You're talking about Keith. Keith always talks about when he evaluates founders, he looks for, spikiness, something that they're the top 0.1% in the world in, right? Because presumably startups are so hard that you have to be so sufficiently exceptional in some axes, in some vertical, that then maybe increases your chances of building, a multi-billion-dollar business. How? Do you kind of prescribe that as you evaluate founders? What's your kind of thought process there?
Well, from me, we have somebody who works with us who asked me like, hey, I want to learn, the venture investing business. And so they sat in a bunch of meetings and stuff and they would ask me afterwards, why are you interested in this company or not that company or whatever? And so it really forced me to articulate, well, why did I? Like my gut told me no, but why? And one of the things I came and really boiled everything down to, you want to back a winner. And a winner is somebody who's going to win regardless of what they're doing. they can win building a company. They can win at playing an instrument. They can win at playing a sport. They're just a winner. They'll figure it out. And so it goes back to excellence and winning and all this kind of stuff. And so, well, what makes a winner? A winner has, they're very, very, very good. Top, 0.1% at something. Usain Bolt is the number one person at running 100 meters. That's a pretty specific thing, right? But he's the best in the world at it. And so then where you get really special people is where they can start to put these things together. I don't think that Michael Jordan was the number one, person in NBA history at defense. But given how good he was on offense, he was pretty damn good at defense, right? And you start to put this stuff together. And so when you're looking at these founders, you're trying to ultimately play probabilities. There's no guarantee. But I think it's why Combinator now has really started to focus on like, show me the excellence in your day-to-day actions, not just your history and kind of who you are as a person, but like show it to me in your actions. And I think that there's a lot of questions that you can ask that can really kind of dig at this from different angles. And if you're able to understand, does somebody exhibit excellence on a day-to-day basis? In my experience, I've invested in over 300 companies at this point. The companies that end up being wildly successful, you can tie it back. And one of the examples I used to give people is when I first started investing, I didn't know what to expect. You invest in a company, you're like, do I hear from you now? Do I have to come to your office? And like, do I go to work for you? Like, how does this work? I was very, very green. And I remember that within like a 48-hour period, I got 2 different updates from companies I had invested in. One company was 2 younger guys in their 20s, and they basically sent an update, and they were like, things are great. It was like pretty much the update. It was like a couple of lines, like two bullet points, not very robust. And it was like, the world is rosy. The other update was from a woman that we had invested in, and it was like maybe a page long, decimal place measurements of all the metrics, specific explanations why things like the paid advertising conversion rate went up or down. And it has this and this and like super detail oriented. Guess which company is now worth a couple $1 billion? Obviously the more detailed update. And so you look at it and you say, oh, they had more obsession in the details. They were more organized. There was more excellence in the way they ran the business. They really understood why are certain metrics going up or down. They had more control over the business. There was more kind of innate, involvement in all the details. And so naturally that compounds over time. Now, just because you write great updates doesn't mean you're going to build a successful company. But I can tell you that if your updates are things are great and it's kind of this rosy picture and it's not very detail oriented, again, just probability tells you like that's probably not a good place to be in. And so it's little things like that. And I got a whole bunch of them. I don't want to say them all out loud because they're very helpful in terms of evaluating sometimes. But the more you can build this like pattern recognition, the more you just start to like get a feel. And I think that's why, people are like, oh, Warren Buffett, he's so smart. He's all this stuff. Buffett's like, dude, I know if I'm going to do the deal in 5 minutes, right? Warren Buffett has trained his human algorithm for what, 6 decades, 7 decades, right? Actually longer, probably 8 decades. Like he's got the most training data out of anyone in his strategy. So if you want to catch up to him, good luck. That's what we're all trying to do, specifically from the investing side, is you're trying to pattern recognize. And so I do think that computers will eventually be very, very effective at doing this. But there's a lot of issues of how, that'll happen. But why can't a computer do it better than a human? They probably will be able to at some point.
It reminds me of something we say internally, which is the way you do one thing is the way you do everything. And I think what I find with some of the most exceptional high performers is any task you give them, it is done to the nth degree. Every I is dotted, every T is crossed, both the lower level details and the higher level strategies accounted for. And, it kind of goes back again to another Keithism, which is like, all right, you have an intern, you tell them, bring 10 cold smoothies and have them arrive at 7 p.m. in the office. That's the very first task, right? Before you give them anything more complicated, that's the very first task. And it says so much about the person, about whether that job is done. And you can incrementally add more and more and more and more and more and more difficulty until kind of some breaking point that hopefully is very far off for the individual. And I also find that, for some of my most high performing friends, to your point, you look at them, they're crushing in business, then they squat, they deadlift, they bench press, 1,000+ pounds, right? And then you go to their, empty apartment, 24 hours later, the entire apartment's done. Like, you're like, what? How's it even possible? But it's because there is this fanatical energy. There's this operational excellence, this savviness. And it is taste too. There's some taste aspect of it. They just perform, right? And that's why you also see them also tend to be very competitive as well. And again, this isn't always, like, usually sometimes it's like, there's like 3 things that they're really, really extreme in, and then everything else they actually are pretty crap in, which is actually fine. My point is, though, that the way you do one thing, you can tend to then extrapolate the way and evaluate the way you do everything. One thing I always like to say, sometimes people ask me, how do you look for pre-seed investments? I'm like, well, first off, I mean, it's very simple, right? I say, okay, what are you building? I say, okay, actually, I don't care. Come in the back room. There's a fluorescent light. Okay, the room is entirely dark. There's this fluorescent light and there's a treadmill. And they get on the treadmill. I say, start running. And I start turning it up. 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 And I let them run. As they're running, I start turning it up and turn it up more and more. And there's really 3 possible outcomes. One is they start throwing up on the treadmill. Another is they, fly back. Or the last one is they can't do it and they get off. And I know for a fact, if you had taken me in the pre-seed and you say, look, Kian, we'll give you $200,000. At this point, you have nothing. You have nothing. You college dropout. Your parents don't even know what you're doing. You just have your will, your determination, your imagination. And if someone said, get on this treadmill and you're going to run until you're going to die, I would have ran until I would have died on the treadmill. That's the level of intensity that you want. And it's so rare. It's so rare. But then the way I do that, I always make a point at the company to any task that I do, right? Often when you're, a manager, a lot of your job is making good decisions and allocating things properly, delegating things properly, right? Having really kind of sound, detailed, all the way up to the higher strategy, making sure that's really kind of sound. But if I have a task, I always make a point to make sure I do that task to the best possible degree. There is no stone that is left unturned, because that sets an expectation then in the entire organization, which is, this is how you do a task. And then to the point that we were talking about earlier, everyone then rises. You see them the next day, holy moly, that person that's doing that small task is doing it to literally as intensely as they possibly can. So I strongly agree kind of with this idea of what excellence looks like. One question for you is, is there a founder, ideally not like an Elon or Travis, someone that that you want to give a shout out to? You saw them do something, you're like, that is motherfucking exceptional. You're like, that I actually am blown away by what they just did. Can you give me something there?
There's a lot of examples. Maybe one of the easy examples is so there's a company called Traba, which I know you know those guys. The first time I ever talked to them, they told me, what's unique about our work culture is we work 9-9-6. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people now have started to understand what these guys do, but they work 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week. I was telling people in our office that the other day, and they were like, I get 5 days a week, but like 6, that's a little crazy. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. That's the point, is that they are obsessed with this. It's a self-selection. There's certain people who want that environment, who want like all stuff, right? And so then we started talking a little bit more. And then I would go and I would see stuff they were building. And one of the problems in that business is they do temp workers for light industrial. So you need 20 people at a warehouse to do something, they'll show up. You need security at a concert venue, they'll bring people, whatever. And so people cancel last minute. Or somebody asked for 20 people, you're sending 20 people. Oh, one person just canceled 45 minutes before the shift. So now you're only going to send 19, but they need 20. And so in this whole like temp industry, whatever, it's just, we only sent 19. That's all we had. Well, they were like, that's not good enough. And so what they did is they built internal software where they can call using AI a bunch of people in the area, and then they increase the amount of pay that you may get so that you'll show up to the shift on 45 minutes notice, because they want to be able to say to the client, you asked for 20, we got you 20. Client doesn't even know everything that they went through to get those people there. That is like a level of obsession on how do I make sure if I tell the client that I'm going to send 20 people, we're going to send 20 people. And then what tools are at my disposal? How do I use incentives? Well, how do I put myself in the seat of the person who's going to be the one who's canceling, or the person who's going to be fulfilling and backfilling the role, etc. There's very few companies in the world that can think like that and can act like that, can build technology
and
like
care
that.
that much too.
Yeah. And so I literally could sit here for hours and rattle off example after example like that. But I think that like that's a perfect example of what we're talking about, where you just are willing to do things and understand things in a way your competition doesn't.
Absolutely. I want to switch topics here quickly to something that Balaji said to me actually in the last podcast we did, where he said to me, Kian, you know, if you look at medicine today, it's like fiat, and then you look at longevity, it's like crypto. Do you agree with that? In terms of the next generation of medicine is longevity, do you think that's true?
I think longevity is a lie in the form that it is packaged today.
Okay.
What is longevity? It's just simply we want to live healthier, longer lives. That's the same thing that's been going on for decades. So we've basically like taken this idea of people want to be healthy and they want to live longer lives, and we've packaged it into this new thing that's like supposed to be sexy and shiny and whatever. But like 40 years ago, people were like, I don't want to die, right? Like I want to be healthy. I want to live longer, whatever. And people are like, what are you talking about? They were smoking cigarettes. Like for a long time, they didn't know that that was unhealthy, right? Or they were eating certain types of food or whatever. And you could even argue they were healthier then than they are now, right? But I think that the desire to live a long, healthy life is in a weird way like innate to humans. It has been around for centuries. People have wanted to do that. And
so what do you think about all these kind of super optimizations and of diet, of sleep, you know, of different diagnostic tests, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? How do you think about, because I know you're a big technologist, you're a big believer in kind of frontier diagnostic testing, like, you know, what Nucleus does, et cetera. Is your problem, or do you find issue with the kind of hyper optimizations of like kind of more, you know, second by second? Or
no, I think Marcus Aurelius was one of the first longevity influencers.
Yeah.
Right? He understood mortality. He wrote. He meditated. All these things that people are talking about, right? He understood controlling your anger and you know all these things that now people are saying, okay, this helps. And so given the knowledge they had at the time, the tools that he had, in a crazy way, he was one of the first people. He would like write about this stuff and you know whatever. Fast forward to today, how many people are still on TikTok being like, meditate, control your anger? Like, I mean, it's literally the same stuff. And so that I think all makes sense. Now, again, use a parallel of sports. One of the examples that I remember my dad telling me all the time when people would debate around baseball is like, at some point, there was a guy who was on a baseball team in Major League Baseball. And he was like, you know what? I don't think I'm going to smoke a cigarette in the dugout. That might hurt my ability to like run around the bases or play the game today. And he stopped doing that. And nobody was like, that's illegal. You can't stop smoking cigarettes, right? No, it's just like he wanted to improve his game. And then there's another guy who was like, I don't think I should eat hamburgers and fries and drink sodas and eat ice cream every day. I'm going to try to eat a healthy diet. He tried. And another guy was like, you know what? I actually think that if I'm a stronger person, that would help my game. And so I'm going to lift weights, right? And then you just like keep doing this. Now the extreme is like, okay, I'm going to just take steroids and like Barry Bonds and Sammy Sosa are just going to like bang it out one summer and like see, you know, who hits more home runs. But when you look at that, it all was in pursuit of being a better baseball player, which they were doing in the early 1900s. And they just kept trying to get better and better and better and better and better. And like it just kept evolving. That to me is what longevity ultimately is people have been practicing this like longevity, you know, pursuit for a long time. It's just now Brian Johnson's got money. He's got tools. He's got a lot more information at his fingertips. Like he's better positioned to go do this to an extreme that no one's ever done before. That's awesome. We should celebrate that, right? And so the reason why I say like longevity is a lie is I think a lot of people are like pointing to it and they're like, oh, look at these like Silicon Valley bros. They all think they can't die. Whatever. Like, dude, pretty much every rich person in the entire world for all of human history has thought that they could figure out a way to not die, right? And so I do think that there is a difference between like the actions and the way it's packaged. And so I throw out the packaging. But the actions, of course, like Brian Johnson will have breakthroughs that I think will lead to better health outcomes for people who don't care about longevity. They're just, I want to live a healthier life. And then also, I think Brian would probably admit this, he will discover things that he thinks work in the short term, and then over time, he'll change his mind on it. He'll say, hey, this thing, you know, lowered my blood pressure. Oh, but 6 weeks later, he figures out there's a trade-off. That's not worth it. Okay, let's go back. But that's part of testing, right? And so you need someone who's willing to do that. If you look at what you guys are doing, okay, it goes back to like, there's information that exists. People don't have access to it. Give people access to their own information. They can make better decisions in whatever they want to apply it to.
Exactly.
And so when you do that, you say people have wanted to know more about their bodies forever.
Yeah.
Right? Now there's like, go to the dentist every 6 weeks or every 6 months, or do this, go to your annual health exam, like we have all these like kind of like best practices. Dude, people weren't doing that 100 years ago. But guess what? They definitely wanted to know, were they going to die? They wanted to know what their health stuff were. They wanted to know their families, like all this stuff. And you see, they wrote it down. And so I think that one of the lessons I've learned I try to read as much as I possibly can, and I read a ton of things that were written long ago. It's like you could be reading it and it was written yesterday. And so that's true for psychology, that's true for health, that's true for all this stuff. It's just that we get better with the tools, the knowledge, the access to information. And now with things like AI, I tweeted this and I don't think people quite understood this. I frankly, I'd read a couple of these types of stories and I thought it was complete bullshit. I thought people were like making this stuff up.
What kind of stories?
So I have a friend that went to the doctor. The doctor diagnosed them with something pretty serious. Like, we need to have a conversation. Let's sit down. Like, this is going to be a sobering conversation. You are at a very high risk for something. You need to make changes. And like, there may be something that's detrimental at the end of this diagnosis, right? Person's very upset. They leave. They take their scans. They're just like, something feels off. They upload their scans to ChatGPT. They ask us some questions. ChatGPT gives them, I'm not going to call it a medical diagnosis. I think more so just like, here's what I see in the scan, right? But like, not further than that. This person then takes the scans, draws arrows on their phone, and uploads the scans with the new arrows pointed at what ChatGPT pointed out to the doctor and says, hey, just out of curiosity, I'm trying to understand this. What am I looking at here at these arrows? Doctor calls my friend, says, I'm like so embarrassed. I can't believe it. I don't know what I was looking at, but all stuff. Whatever. Turns out ChatGPT was right. The doctor was wrong. They don't have this super serious diagnosis that the doctor had originally told them. There's something that is worth paying attention to, but it's not to the extreme high risk, very detrimental, sobering conversation type, level. And so the doctor obviously is a little embarrassed. The person never told the doctor, to my understanding, that, hey, AI like corrected you or anything like that. But when I heard this story, I was just like, oh, the other stories I read, those aren't made up. Like, this is happening live right now. This is not like in 20 years, AI is going to be whatever. And so I wouldn't trust AI to like, I'm not going to ever see a human doctor again. I'm just going to go to AI, right? But what it seems like is this stuff is already serving as a second opinion, a double check on the doctor. And so you have to remember, this is the worst that the technology is ever going to be moving forward. It only gets better from here. It gets more information. The models get better, all this stuff. So eventually you get a bifurcation in the medical field. You're going to have doctors who embrace this stuff. And when I tweeted this, went pretty viral, and there's all these comments of people being like, it happened for this. The doctor told me my ankle wasn't, broken. I put the x-ray in and ChatGPT pointed it out, whatever. And then there was doctors who were like, we are trying to actively implement this stuff into our practice right now, because what we don't want is, we don't want to see a patient and the patient goes home and gets a different thing. We want right there in the room, here's what I think, here's what the AI thinks. And now by embracing that, it actually makes the experience of the doctor better. It can put people at ease. And I think there's a lot of doctors who are like, look, we miss things. I see thousands of patients a year. Like, I'm going to miss something. And so I need that second check. And so like, that's one whole group. And then there's going to be the doctors who, fight it. It's the candle makers who say electricity is going to kill everybody, and they get left behind. And so I think that technology, longevity, all this stuff is like converging. And really, what are we trying to do when it comes to what is now kind of like big longevity movement? We're trying to be healthier. And that is a human pursuit as old as time. And so what food you eat, what exercise, what supplements you take, what red light therapy, all this stuff that people have, there's a hint of truth in all of it. And so a multivitamin is a great example. Do multivitamins work or not? You can find a lot of evidence that they don't work. You can find a lot of evidence that they do work. But really, at the end of the day, I think most people take it because it's insurance. They're like, hey, if I pee it all out, whatever. I spent, 25 cents today on the insurance that maybe it does work. And so obviously you're going to get people who prey on folks, right, who take advantage of that type of stuff. And then you're going to get people who are trying to do the right thing and build the right stuff. And I think that, kind of bringing it back to what you guys are doing, when you're giving people information about themselves and then saying, use this to make decisions, do whatever, it's kind of one of like the most selfless or like service-based acts you can do. It's like, we're going to build an entire company to simply educate you more about your own body.
Yeah.
And then you go and you use that. And I think that as much as we joke around about, the intelligence gene or whatever kind of stuff, to me, the best businesses, that's what they do. Like Jeff Bezos is rich because he figured out, how can I let somebody press a button on their phone and get something delivered to them in under 24 hours? Serving them, right? Same thing here is I think you guys have figured out this very interesting way to take technology, the interest people have in health, service them, give them access to their own information, and empower them. And usually those businesses can be very valuable.
100% agree. And I think that you make a very sage point about how medicine today is becoming data science. So if you really think about what a doctor does, right? A doctor takes a lot of data and then makes some sort of assessment. That's both in the kind of preventative, diagnosis, and also treatment. It's the entirety stack of someone's care. And so, you can see a world where you start having someone's genome, their blood, their full body MRIs, their X-ray scans, their urea analyses, their wearables, etc., all being implemented together in a single platform. It's real time, it's consumer centric, it's beautiful, it's quantified, and start basically building a real-time model of the human body and flagging molecular abnormalities prior to any phenotypic signal. Because today, to your point, you cough, you sneeze, maybe you're stuffy or something, then you go to the doctor, right? But the reality is, or God forbid, maybe you have some lump somewhere, right? And then you go to the doctor. And what happens is that prior to any actual kind of way that a human being could sense, there's always some molecular underpinning. So how can we start treating medicine not as sort of a qualitative discipline that requires you going to school for 30 years, but as just data science? And part of that is you need an interpretive layer that can actually process and digest and analyze all this data. And that has come through AI. So to your point, there's multiple trends actually kind of converging here. One is if you look at the decrease in cost of reading a genome, right? What used to be $100 million, today Nucleus does for a couple $100s, right? And then you also see the rise of a variety of other diagnostic tests and other lab tests all becoming much cheaper. What that means is they can all start reading different parts of the body and basically do that at scale. That's all going to generate data. That then data needs to be basically interpreted by some being, some entity. Now it turns out this can actually be interpreted by AI, which will analyze and make sense of it and continuously track it for the entirety of someone's life, and then flag when there's abnormalities, which then can push someone to this kind of AI merged with human doctor's office that can, far before there's any kind of real disease state, actually catch a disease. That is true precision medicine. And precision medicine comes from data. So I always find it very interesting when people tell these stories. I actually saw your tweet. I saw all the commotion around it. And I saw these people basically taking their data and uploading it. It's also a story, to your point too, of empowerment, right? Because suddenly you have patients being agents of their own care. And for too long in medicine, there was this paternalism attitude of, hey, you're the patient, I'm the doctor, I know, you don't know. But the number of stories, even before AI, where somehow the patient had intuited something about themselves that was maybe missed by the doctor. That's not to knock doctors, obviously, but it is to treat doctors and treat medicine as a companion, right? A doctor isn't a gatekeeper for your health. A doctor should be an extension of you, an extension of your health that helps you basically, to your point, cure yourself. I mean, it's your body. It's your body, right?
Do you think that doctors are going to get replaced?
I think that
over, let's say, 25 years.
I do. Yes, I do. I think that, I think there's going to be different roles for people who are specialists. So like my dad's an ophthalmologist. He's an eye doctor. I think that there's going to be various jobs that he has. He does a lot of surgery, right? I can imagine there's still going to be need for experts in especially very specific kind of, there's eyes or heart or something, very like specialists in some region of the body that's going to be very much needed. A lot of my dad's job is running an algorithm. And the algorithm goes something like this. What's your name? Okay. Test 1, right? Some sort of test. Test 2, test 3, looks at the data. You need this pill. You need to get this follow-up testing. You have this disease. And then each of those have another kind of if-then-else statement, right? In other words, it's very automatizable. You can
100%.
see an entire world where you can think of basically every possible flow for every possible disease. As long as you can get, to my point, the data feedback, there's no reason why an AI can't make the logical leap, especially if you have humanoids, right? So I think doctors are going to converge on really two things. One is going to be, there is going to be a psychological component, which is very much true today, right? Doctors, bedside manner is a very huge thing. Maybe you don't want the, Harvard doctor because maybe they're kind of an asshole, right? Maybe you want someone who doesn't have the Harvard degree, right? But it's just as competent, but it's also a little bit nicer, right? That's a very strong kind of psychological component to being doctors today. And I think also super specialized knowledge, right? I think super specialized knowledge is always going to be needed to complement and double check the AI and just to make sure that nothing is kind of awry. I think that's going to be very much needed as well. Now, do I think that also the entire kind of, I don't think we'll think about it as doctors anymore, though. I don't think it's going to be maybe even called doctors anymore. And I think the entire kind of medical system that's designed for you to go to school for 16 years. I mean, there are literally some certain specialists. You have to go to school for 16 years, right, including residency. I mean, you think about your medical school today, right? You probably, it's a very earnest thing. You're probably like, okay, I'm going to go to medical school. My parents really wanted me to become a doctor. I'm going to train so hard because that's, we talked about this earlier, but that's your world. That's what people prize. That's the most valuable thing. That's what everyone knows doctors. There's kind of very much this kind of culture. 16 years from then, I mean, AI might have changed absolutely everything. I mean, everything might just become completely replaced with AI. And not just in the terms of like the AI will make emergent discoveries, but also in the sense that the AI might literally be the one that just replaces the vast majority of what you were trained to do. And that's kind of the way I think about it. I think you make a good point that it needs to be complementary. I think it's like, often when you see massive technological shifts, it doesn't fully like replace things as much as it's almost like, the old thing where you add more roads on the street and then there's more cars. That's like kind of what this is. Like you're increasing the capacity of every human and then suddenly the actual demand side will also accordingly increase, right? So I do think the role is going to evolve and not fully be replaced. But maybe what I'll say is in the classical definition of a doctor, yes, I do think it's going to be replaced. Yes.
Yeah. And I think surgery is probably going to get replaced as well.
Yeah, I think so.
Right. And again, just 25 years
later. Yeah,
so
later on.
It'll take a while, but I don't think people should fear that. I think that's exciting.
It's going to be decrease the error rate.
The machine should be more accurate. The machine should have more access to information.
100%.
The machine should be better.
It should
right?
be.
That's the only way that you're going to replace is if it's actually an improvement.
100%. And human beings already know intuitively that machines have much greater, success rate than humans. Human error. That's literally a term that we use in our lexicon because we know human beings are far more prone to error than a machine. And if you think about what a surgery is it's a very well-defined, kind of a controlled, localized, basically experience, if you will, that can be easily trainable. The analogy almost for a surgery is like a chess. And we know AI is the best in the world at chess, but here's the thing, people still play chess, right? Maybe that's maybe for fun versus for actual utility, but people still play it. And I think the same thing's gonna happen with surgeries. You can very easily, I imagine, train a humanoid robot on, 100,000, 200,000, 1 million of these surgeries. And I'm almost certain it's gonna be far more prolific than a human being. And to your point, that shouldn't be scared. That shouldn't be something that people fear, but should be embraced.
Well, it also, what is society optimizing for? We want efficiency, we want productivity, we want healthy people, we want all this stuff. If you think about, there's a lot of jobs, doctors, one type of job, but AI is going after a lot of jobs that people don't want to do.
Yeah. And
so when you think of it from that perspective, actually you're going to give the gift to people of their time back to go spend doing other things. Humanoid robots, I think, is fascinating because imagine if they can take out the trash, if they can clean your house, 100%. If they can do the dishes, do the laundry, right? All this stuff. Like you'd be like, how much?
Yeah.
Right. If it's, the cost of a Netflix subscription, I don't know if it'll get that low, but like, sure. Right. And one of the questions I ask people now is, do you think that you'll ever trust the humanoid to watch your children as a babysitter?
I feel like that reminds me of this
it's like the raw question.
There's an old short story about, oh my God, I'm going to forget it. But there's an old short story about parents who leave their kids in some futuristic home and then the home comes alive and it takes care of the kids. It's a really famous sci-fi author who wrote the story. So that's immediately where my mind jumps to that story. I have to think of it. Maybe we put a link in the caption or something. I think eventually, yeah. I in a way though, if you think about it, we already do that today. What I mean is, I mean, there's a video camera that you look through. I mean, I don't think it's
Of
that
course.
different than that, right?
Of
Like,
course.
is my baby okay? And where's that data going? It's going to some, Amazon, AWS server, right? Hopefully they're doing good, fine stuff with the data. Hopefully
Yep.
it's super protected. But so I think it's already happening today. It's like when you pay enough attention in the world, you realize very soon, it's like almost like part of seeing the future, just seeing, again, the present very clearly. It's all the old thing about how, the future is just unequally distributed, right? And I think that's very, very true with technology today. It's like very kind of concentrated in a small group of people's hands. And, the further you move away from tech, the more kind of abstracted it is to people. And that's why you see, the memes are so powerful, because suddenly it becomes a cultural moment and everyone can be like, wow, there's this new amazing tool, right? Where maybe otherwise without, what's it called? The Gilby Studio, whatever, right? Maybe otherwise it wouldn't have been as widely embraced or adopted without almost, the most important thing started off as toys, the kind of PG, idea. So there's something to that too that I think has been very powerful. That has happened recently kind of on Twitter and sort of kind of internet culture.
Yeah, well, I think it's tools create conversation. Conversation creates culture.
Yeah.
Right? And so if you keep releasing new tools, eventually it will impact culture because people will talk about it. They'll use it.
And then it drives capital, as we saw, OpenAI raised, what was it?
$40 billion.
Yeah.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit of money. Largest private capital raise ever, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, wow. I mean, how big do you think these rounds are going to get?
It's hard to see topping that one.
Yeah.
$40 billion is a lot of money.
Yeah. What was the post money?
I don't know if it's pre or post, but 300.
Okay. Wow. I mean, maybe we have $1 trillion private business. I mean, that seems like the trajectory we're going to be on, right?
100%.
Yeah. Are you an investor in OpenAI? No. Are you an investor in any kind of LLM? Do you think it's going to get commoditized because of the money being thrown at it? What do you think?
I think it already is commoditized.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that the businesses aren't going to be successful, right?
Yeah.
Look at Perplexity. Perplexity you can use DeepSeek, you can use, I think O4, you can use Perplexity's models, just, deep research, all this stuff.
Yeah.
But they've got a subscription business. OpenAI's got a subscription business, right?
So
that is the model.
The
It's
application layer, you think is the king? Application layer is king?
Yeah, and it can be vertically integrated with the model, or you could switch out the models on the back end. But like ChatGPT has trained people to go there and ask questions. Perplexity has trained a different group of people to go there and ask questions. So they own that mind share, that relationship, that stickiness. Which model kind of doesn't matter if you just get the answer that you want, right?
Yeah. Do you use Perplexity? You use ChatGPT? Which one do you use?
I use Perplexity.
But why? I'm just curious. It's a better interface.
I just started using it, and it works great, and I'm a pretty big fan of how they're using the different models and stuff. And I met some people on the team. Then you're like, okay, now I see how you guys are thinking, right? After a while, then we started working together on like using them as a research tool for some of the content we do, and like you just like over time, you're just like, all right, I vibe with this, right?
Yeah.
And I still, if certain things, I'll use ChatGPT or whatever. But if you said to me like, hey, look this up, I go to Perplexity first.
Okay, well, let's do the rapid fire. All right. Are you ready for rapid fire round?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. This is it, by the way. We're almost there. This is a good conversation. All right. Here we go. Rapid fire here. AI investing, game changer or overhyped?
Game changer.
Would you trust an AI financial advisor, yes or no?
Yes.
Crypto regulation, necessary or a disaster?
Necessary.
Will Bitcoin hit 1 million in our lifetime, yes or no?
Of course.
Of course. Decentralized social media, future or flop?
Flop.
What is more dangerous, inflation or government overreach?
Both.
Both. Okay, fine. Most underrated investor of all time?
Samia Olian.
Who's that?
He's from Saudi Arabia. He was working at what is today Aramco in the warehouse as a manager.
Wow.
They created a program where they had to get the oil out. So they had to build the pipelines, all the stuff. And they created a program where they were going to give preference to Saudi-owned vendors. And he happened to hear that they needed dump trucks or construction or whatever. And so he said, I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to start that company if you guys give me the contract. They gave him the contract. Did it again and again and again and again. He built this huge thing called the Olean Group, very large. And he was always obsessed with international markets in the United States. and he needed to borrow money. And he would go to the banks in New York and be like, I need to borrow money. And they would say, we can't lend to you. All your assets are in Saudi. How do we get them if we ever need to get the collateral? And so he said, okay, well, what if I put some money in a New York bank? They said, that'd be helpful. So he started with like 50 grand. He ended up becoming the single largest investor in the United States from Saudi Arabia. And he became known as like the nice white knight. So when all of the corporate raiders and people were coming after your companies or hostile, takeovers, whatever, you could call him up. And if he liked you, he would invest in your business. He would sit on your board. He would help protect you. And his returns were like off the charts. And most people don't even know his name, let alone the people who do know his name think of him as this massive conglomerate in the kind of industrial manufacturing construction industry in Saudi, which helped really build what became their oil industry. But his investment returns were pretty insane. And he was basically like the quintessential special situation investor, just did it a different era in a different way from a different country. And so a lot of people don't know that much about him.
Amazing. Well, guys, thank you for another great episode of High Alchemy. Pomp, what an amazing conversation. Spanned genomics, AI, success, excellence, some crypto even thrown in there. What did we not talk about? Thanks so much for having me here, Pomp. I appreciate you.
Thanks for doing it.